All right, we're live streaming after Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia Fight Game Podcast Extra, bringing back an old favorite, Carlos Toro. We've done a few of these live streams, but I admitted to Robert Silva that, of late my boxing has been a little light, doing so much pro wrestling stuff, and with this show, which is in the Fight Game Media feed, I can go back to doing a little bit more MMA and boxing. I'm not so pro wrestling centric like I have to be on some of these other shows. So perfect time to make a little bit of a comeback here with what an event, huh? Like it was quite the event that they put on, and it really felt like for the first time in a little while, like this was a really big boxing match. Like it just felt big.
Yeah, it really was quite the spectacle. I gotta admit, it's been quite a while, as you said, that boxing has sort of felt this big, where it's just kind of it went beyond the boxing hardcores, the big fans of the sport, and it kind of crossed into the mainstream stratosphere. And overall, I think this was kind of a perfect storm of two young undefeated stars who delivered us for all intents and purposes. It was a really good fight. It
Yeah.
was dramatic from the very beginning with Garcia opening things up with a decent first round, and then everything changed in that second round. I mean, we'll get into the nitty gritty of it all in a second, but overall, I mean, you're talking 20,000 plus in Vegas, a pay-per-view that I think is going to end up doing great numbers. I mean, the best non-Canelo numbers, non-YouTube, whatever you want to call it, early Jake Paul number, like actual boxing pay-per-views. I think this will end up being the best it'll see for a fight not involving Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, or Canelo Alvarez.
It's a great point that you made about the YouTube stuff because, Jake Paul, I think for the most part, he's been on Showtime. Logan Paul also had the fight with Floyd Mayweather on Showtime. But the idea, and this idea is still out there, of this like celebrity boxing, like this influencer boxing. The reason why that stuff can exist and that stuff can do good business is because the politics of actual boxing ruin the idea of a big event. And I'm so happy that Oscar De La Hoya and Premier Boxing and Showtime and DAZN, they all sort of came together to make this event, because when you do the right thing, and, I'm talking to Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence, you're going to do great numbers because this is exactly what the fan base wants. And when you don't give the fan base what they want, then they go and look for the, more the circus kind of stuff, because it's easy to promote that stuff with YouTube and your Instagrams and Jake Paul sees a gap in fights being made, and he's like, I'm going to try, because boxing isn't making these fights that people really want to see. So if we can do more of Gervonta Davis and Ryan Garcia, a lot of that other stuff just goes by the wayside, because you really have the true professionals in fights that fans want to see.
And to kind of put a pro wrestling analogy, this is what happens when two entities, forget about their own side of the street and decide to work together. I mean, look at the success of Forbidden Door with AEW and New Japan, how great of an event that was. This was something to that effect, where you have Golden Boy Promotions, you have PBC, and you have the different networks figuring out a way to actually make this work. And the few times in the last few years where we've had major fights with that kind of context, it's always knocked it out of the park. The 3 fights between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, that involved so many different entities between ESPN and PBC and Top Rank and Frank Warren and all the fighters and the fighters involved. And you see it again when boxing is able to push politics on the wayside. It produces magic that it's, for lack of a better word, unlike any other sport can produce. And boxing right now, We're in the middle of the NBA playoffs, and LeBron James is, I think, playing right now, or if not, that Lakers game going. No one's talking about I mean, aside from LeBron getting punched in the family jewels, but that, no one's talking about that. We're talking about Ryan Garcia and Tank Davis.
Yeah, the one of the things about UFC shows, and this isn't, we're not going to talk about UFC, but UFC has created the idea that Saturday night, once a month, there's an event, and you see it on Twitter because everybody's tweeting about it. Even people who may not be giant UFC fans, they just know that that's kind of the thing once a month. And that's what boxing previously was, right? Like, every month there was something for fans to get excited about. And that's what I want to see. I want to see stuff come back to this because I'm all for Joshua and Usyk, and that is DAZN providing with the Eddie Hearn stuff, providing some of these big fights, but they're overseas, and they're early in the afternoon for the US fans. I mean, I loved the matchroom stuff. I love those guys fighting, but when you can make fights with up and comers and guys in their prime like tonight, like that's just the way to go. And it really was. It took over Saturday, and this LeBron game, like you're mentioning, the Lakers are blitzing the Grizzlies. I hate both of those teams, so I was just like, who do I root for? It's like, do you want diabetes or do you want gout? Like, which one do you want? So, yeah, just like both those teams. But that this fight for those 30 minutes, it was really the talk of Twitter as this game was going on. So I'm with you on that. So let's dial into the fight because this was a tremendous like after watching this fight, I have so much more of a respect for Tank Davis and his acumen as a boxer because he set up traps for Garcia in both knockdowns and the knockout to where I don't know if Garcia saw it coming. I don't know if maybe there wasn't a lot of tape on certain things and Tank kind of changed it up on them, but in the first round, feeling out process, you got two counterpunchers, neither of them really wanting to throw a power shot. They don't want to leave, each other open. And then in round two, Tank kind of gives this idea to Garcia that, I don't like being in such close quarters. I'm going to kind of bail out here. And so Garcia pounces and he starts overreaching, thinking that, oh, he's got Tank on the run. And all Tank did was set him up for a tremendous left hand. And Garcia got hit so flush and went right down. And I thought, wow, like, I was sort of not screaming because, I like both guys. I for business purposes, Ryan Garcia winning to get to the rematch was probably best for business. But, Tank was setting him up. And I'm looking at Ryan going like, dude, do not fall for this trap. Dude, do not fall for this trap. And boom. We were talking on the Discord, you, me, and Larry Caution, and we were just kind of like doing the play-by-play as it was happening. And I was like, no, like he's overreaching, and boom, he gets knocked down. That type of stuff in boxing, like that type of acumen, that type of the way he just set him up, it is so over most people's head, I'm sure, but it is like that is what makes boxing often, in when it's at its best, like almost a perfect sport. Like watching stuff like that, I just go, oh, like that's my heart right there. The way he set Garcia up, and Garcia knew it. He's like, oh God, like I just all the things that he was saying in the hype to the fight, and they did a great job. But man, Tank just sets him up, and I know he gets compared to Mayweather a lot, but it was sort of a Mayweather-esque thing that he did. Stayed calm, set him up, and boom, when the shot was there, he hit it. What did you think about that round two knockdown?
I mean, well, first of all, my immediate thought when that knockdown happened, my immediate thought was this is the Luke Campbell fight all over again for Ryan Garcia.
Very true. Very true.
Overzealous. Campbell was able to take advantage early. And, and this has been a problem sometimes with Ryan Garcia in a lot of his fights, even the ones where he wins early. He gets very overzealous and he tries to blitz his opponent very early because he's such a such a fast fighter, and he has plenty of power. But the problem is that when you're that reckless and you're that overzealous, you do leave yourself wide open for a very good counter shot, which Tank Davis is, you can very much argue he's the best counterpuncher in the world right now, pound for pound. And I know there's some people that are thinking, he's been working a lot, he's been improving on that. And honestly, ending the fight, I still had not seen anything from Ryan Garcia that showed me he had fixed those defensive issues under Joe Goossen. And remember, back in the old pound for pound setup with me and Robert Silva, when Ryan Garcia first linked up with Joe Goossen, we both came to the same conclusion that as a puncher, Joe Goossen is going to elevate Ryan Garcia. The problem is, Joe Goossen does a great job at elevating a fighter's strength, but doesn't really do quite the same for their weaknesses. And Ryan Garcia's biggest weakness was his chin, and which played perfectly into Gervonta Davis. He's a bit of a slow starter. If he can sort of weather that storm, Ryan Garcia was primed to be picked apart. As we saw, from like rounds 2 through 5, Gervonta Davis pretty much won all of them. I think some may argue maybe round 4, kind of close, but I mean, I had a Gervonta Davis a sweep 2 through 5, and
yeah, me too.
Gervonta Davis is such an exceptional fighter. His punching volume is low for what you would think of a fighter at that level. But what people don't realize is that what little shots that Gervonta Davis throws, he throws them with such ferocity and with such power and precision that it doesn't matter that he may lose some rounds because the other fighter was more active and Gervonta Davis wasn't. Because his power and his ring IQ is the great equalizer, actually, and just overwhelms opponents at times. You see it so many different in fights where he sets himself with these beautiful knockouts. Look back at the Leo Santa Cruz fight. Down in the corner, just throws this beautiful left hand that just completely sends Leo Santa Cruz to another dimension.
Did you watch any of the All Access stuff?
I have watched a little bit. I mean, the day job has really kept me busy. But I've seen clips of it, which, by the way, Showtime knocks out of the park a lot with All Access stuff.
So Davis was talking about that knockout, and he was saying, why would Leo Santa Cruz throw the same punch 3 times in a row? Like, I'm not that guy that you do that to, right? Like, I'm going to figure it out. And, as I'm watching this fight, I'm just like, okay, it took him exactly 1 round to figure out Ryan Garcia. That was amazing, right? You talk about the IQ, the ring awareness, the angles. I was kind of mentioning in the Discord, like the way that he was slipping the punches and the way that Garcia was reacting to the feints. Like, it was like these guys from a defensive perspective are in completely different ballparks. So I agree with you 2 through 5. I thought, Davis easily won those rounds. And then in round 6, if you thought that Garcia won the round, I could see that. I gave it to him as well. But again, it was kind of like Davis, I don't know if he didn't throw the round in any way. Garcia was mixing it up a little bit more. He started throwing the right hand, because in rounds 2 through 5, he was just, really throwing the left hook and then covering up, because he knew that by throwing the left hook, he was going to leave himself open. And so he's kind of throwing it, but he's not committing to it. And he's making sure that he's defensively, his hands are up. And I'm just like, man, you are such a predictable fighter right now. And then in round 6, throwing the jab more, throwing the straight right more, he's getting a little bit more confident. And it was almost like it's exactly what Davis wanted him to do, was to get confident, because in round 6, they're in a moment where I thought Garcia should have clinched. I thought, Tank Davis is low and they're close. And so I thought he should have held on so that ref could have broken it up, because Davis is so low. Any punch he throws is going to be to the body or an uppercut. And Ryan is just out there, right? He leaves the body open, and Tank just hits him with a liver shot. It didn't even look like it was a fantastic punch. It just landed it in the right spot. And Garcia takes it. You could tell it affected him because he started to back up.
Mm-hmm.
And that liver shot, usually that body shot, it usually has a little bit more of like a 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Okay, like that's it. This one was like Garcia had about 10, he took about 6 or 7 steps backward. And I was like, wow, okay, maybe he's able to shake this off. Like I've never really seen anyone shake this shot off before. And then no, he didn't, goes down on a knee. His nose is bleeding. And the referee counts to 9. And he nods his head like he's going to get up. And he tries to get up at 9. And the feet just didn't work. The legs didn't work. He couldn't get up. And that was it. And, it was, he put, Luke Campbell down with a body shot that retired, Luke Campbell. So he's done that to somebody. I know Mar Ranello was comparing it, or it may have been Al. Somebody compared it to Hopkins and De La Hoya. Everyone remembers that fight.
Yeah.
Where De La Hoya is like banging on the floor because he can't get up from this liver shot. De La Hoya's given up like 25 pounds in that fight, by the way. But like it was just amazing on one end for Tank, but on the other end, I thought, okay, Ryan's got some work to do when it comes to stuff like this, because in a fight where he was not going to be able to hit the guy eventually, I don't think he was going to be able to knock Davis. I don't think he's going to hit him enough to really put him out. So it's a game where you're really trying to win rounds and gain points. And the defense just needs to be a little bit better, because Tank was waiting. He was setting him up and waiting, and it was just beautiful to watch.
And going back to that 6th round, you mentioned that you didn't think he threw the round. I didn't think Gervonta threw that round, but with that 6th round, the difference was Ryan Garcia was starting to throw the right hand.
Yeah.
And when he started to make that adjustment, now looking back with being 2020, I kind of started to think that Gervonta Davis took that round really more so to see how does Ryan throw that right. Does he do anything specific with that right hand? Does he leave the body open when he throws the right hand? And if you think about it, I mean, Gervonta is low enough where he attacks the body so well, and Ryan doesn't do a great job when he threw that right hand. Doesn't do a great job covering that right side of the body, and that's exactly where Gervonta hit him.
Yeah.
And just like how it took Gervonta that first round to attack him in the second, it only took Gervonta the 6th round to take out Ryan Garcia in the 7th. That's what impressed me the most. Not just having that ability to adjust and be able to come up with a quick plan of attack, but to do that twice in a fight is just absolutely impressive.
So there was a moment, I forget, I think it was in the second, may have been before he actually got put down, but there was a little bit of a manhandling where Garcia was kind of using his strength to kind of push Tank away, and Tank, Tank is getting that lower center of gravity, but he almost made it seem, he almost gave Garcia a false sense of security, like that Garcia was actually the stronger guy, right? So then Garcia gets a little overconfident. But in that moment, when Tank tried to go down, Garcia like grabbed him as almost to say like, no, you're not going to, you're not going to throw this peekaboo shot on me. And then that's what he didn't do in the 7th. And the peekaboo shot is what puts him down. So I thought that was really interesting as well, because Tank went sort of similar thing that he did in the 2nd to set up the knockdown, that he sets up the knockout in the 7th. So just really smart stuff, really cerebral stuff. And, he does the interview at the end and he's just like, I'm just the smarter boxer. And I was like, absolutely 100%. Right. And this is not a diss at Ryan Garcia, because Garcia's still young. You mentioned Goosen earlier, and in the All Access, the only thing Goosen did was just gas him up. He was just like, oh, you throw the right hand like you're a middleweight. I was just like, okay, dude, like he's a strong kid, but I don't, that was all that Goosen did on the All Access was just try and gas him up with how strong he was and how great of an athlete he was, and it was almost like again, like you said, think in hindsight. So in this All Access, he had a trainer come in and was like, "Oh, I train basketball players and baseball players, and Ryan's just a different beast altogether." And I was like, "Man, did they really have to instill the confidence in him that he could win this fight?" Now we know because of his past, he's had some issues with depression or whatever you want to call it, and he's actually brought light to it, which has been fantastic because athletes don't often speak about that, and sometimes when they do, it's like a weakness thing. And so for him to speak out about it and just to be honest about it, I thought that was tremendous. But almost watching the All Access, I was like, man, they're really building him up, and I wonder if he believes it himself. And so, that's another thing because Tank is just he's just a different boxer altogether than you usually see. And again, the Mayweather comparison different. He doesn't have. Nobody has, the defense like Floyd and, the ability to just set guys up. But it was a little reminiscent of it to me. And when I was watching Tank, I was like, man, there's a high level of boxing that I appreciate. And he's up there just based on, the last few fights that I've seen him. Some of these fights, he kind of gets bored. You can tell he's like not 100% like into it. But this one, he was dialed in and that was a virtuoso performance.
Yeah. One thing I do want to mention, I mean, one thing, Ryan in his discussion of mental health, which I agree with you, fantastic. I think more athletes should speak up because I think it does bring it shines a light on something that for as much as people have made a lot, for as much as mental health awareness has made a lot of advancement, there's still a little bit of a stigma attached to it, especially when it comes to athletes. But thinking about it, what you mentioned, it does kind of feel like a little bit that with Ryan, when you're training Ryan, then maybe there needs to be some extra consideration with how how you sort of train a guy like Ryan. That maybe you need to take his mental health a lot more consideration. And obviously, I can't speak to obviously what ultimately led to the split with Eddie Reynoso and Canelo Alvarez and Ryan. But part of me thinks that maybe on the mental aspect, maybe that may have played some kind of role. And maybe he needed to be in an environment where Ryan deems to be a lot more open, a lot more welcoming, a lot more positive. Now, could Joe maybe have overdone it a little, maybe,
Yeah.
but that's the kind of guy that Joe is.
Right.
He overdoes things a little bit on either side of the spectrum.
So, Robert and I, when we did the preview to this fight, we talked about, or Robert brought up the other three guys at that weight class, Devin Haney and Lomachenko, who are going to fight next month. And then kind of on the outside looking in, Shakur Stevenson.
Mm-hmm.
So Haney and Lomachenko, the fact that fight is happening is tremendous. And, do you think it's a Davis gets the winner? Are they going to be able to figure that out?
For as much as I think boxing won tonight with politics being thrown out the window, I still think this is maybe one instance where the politics of it all is still going to kind of get in the way of things. And I know some people may think, well, it's for the undisputed title. Why wouldn't Tank Davis jump at that bit? At this point, I don't think Tank values championships the same way that he did maybe in the past, because he's already won titles in on several occasions. Whether or not you think some of his titles are truly legitimate, but that's a whole separate matter regarding the WBA and all that stuff. Fact of the matter is, Gervonta Davis already won world titles multiple times, so it is. And again, this is a guy. This is a guy who has been mentored by Floyd Mayweather for many years, and Floyd, after a certain period, values titles less and value big money fights more often. And I think that with Tank Davis, you might get something similar to that. Now, I think you and I both agree that Tank Davis fighting the winner of Devin Haney versus Vasily Lomachenko is big money.
Yeah.
I think that'd be a tremendous pay-per-view to sell, but I don't think that you can sit Tank and well, it is interesting because here's the thing. Devin Haney, I believe, is a free agent after this fight against Lomachenko. If Haney wins, and I think he does beat Lomachenko in this one, does Devin Haney open himself up to potentially fighting Gervonta Davis? Now, the problem here is two things. One, Gervonta Davis is not going to allow himself to be the B-side at this point. Does Devin Haney, is he able to swallow pride to maybe accept being the B-side despite being the undisputed champion? But secondly, Haney's now at a point where after Lomachenko, we don't know if he's ever going to fight at 135 again. His body is at the point where that he can't cash that lightweight check much longer. He's going to have to move up to 140. And I remember talking to Eddie Hearn a couple of years ago, back when Devin Haney fought at Madison Square Garden against Zaur Abdullayev, when he won the first interim belt that he won a couple of years ago. And I remember Eddie telling me that this is a guy that realistically can fight. He's at 135 now. He could fight all the way to at 154 because Haney is a big guy, and his body. And Devin said it himself. He doesn't know how much longer he's got. So, if Devin Haney versus Gervonta Davis happens, I don't think it's going to be at a hard 135 limit. I think it's going to be either at a catch weight, or like we saw tonight, or it ends up going to 140. But either way, I think that is maybe the best fight, or maybe not necessarily the best fight, but certainly the biggest fight that you can make, in my opinion, outside of, as you mentioned, maybe Shakur Stevenson.
All right. So if Tank Davis decides that is not the way that he wants to go, what is a bigger fight for him than a Devin Haney? Obviously, the Ryan Garcia fight was a big fight because Ryan has a giant following, but Davis is still the better box office guy. Mm-hmm. Is there somebody at 140 who you make a catchweight fight with that's that big? I don't know. I don't really see it.
No, and I'm just trying to think, because once upon a time, maybe Teofimo Lopez could have been that.
Right.
But since the loss to George Kambosos, he's just not the star that he once was. And there are other guys at 140 that you can make it, that could be really good, really appealing, interesting fights, but it doesn't cross over to that mainstream level like a Ryan Garcia, where you have that other side who can connect with that kind of audience just as well as he does. Now, I say this, but you have guys that could make for, I would argue, tougher fights. Regis Prograis at the top of the list, in my opinion, at 140, that would make for an outstanding fight. I don't see that kind of fight happening. I'd be a little surprised if it does, but that would be a tremendous fight. That's a fight that I think would make, I would say, sell more than the average Tank Davis pay-per-view. That could be good. And maybe Teofimo Lopez, that could still be something. Again, Teofimo Lopez with Top Rank. I don't think Tank is going to work with Bob anytime soon, in my opinion. So, and again, 140, they're just 140 at the top is currently in a bit of a weird transition period because Josh Taylor is still there,
Mm-hmm.
but he's given up all but one of his belts. So it's kind of in a weird period trying to figure out, okay, Josh Taylor is not the undisputed champion. We need to figure out who's going to be holding all these other belts. And at 135, I don't know. It's tough if you're not fighting Shakur or Devin or Vasily Lomachenko. There's really not a whole lot. I've said this a long time ago that I think a guy like Frank Martin, who is a PBC fighter, who actually is coming off of a win against Michel Soro, a phenomenal win against Michel Soro, that it could be one of those where the WBA orders Gervonta Davis to fight Frank Martin because Tank holds the WBA regular world title at lightweight. That's a fight that could be ordered, and you think, all right, it's ordered. It's in-house ish.
Yeah.
And you can sell, and maybe you can sell a pay-per-view because now with this win, he set himself up into that next level where you can make bigger risks on the B side for pay-per-view main events and still come off relatively well. So I don't know if that's the next fight, but I could potentially see that down the road for Tank Davis.
And Martin is ranked number 2 in the WBA, right behind Garcia. So that does make some sense on that end. What is next for Garcia, though? He's, I think most smart money was on Tank.
Right.
There was some upset potential here, but it seemed like this was pretty much set up for, as long as it was an entertaining fight, Garcia was not going to come out of it worse for the wear. The way that he got knocked down, the way that he got knocked out, I don't know if people see that as a really good performance by him, but I'm sure he's going to take some time away. I'm sure that, just the bigness of this promotion, he did a lot of the media. I saw him doing stuff, and Tank playing mind games by showing up for press conferences late and stuff. He's, he is a star, but at the same time, the boxing side of things, I just wonder kind of where he goes next to kind of rebuild, to get back up. Because again, he's still so young, he can improve and get better and learn from this. Does he take some time away and maybe get a couple tune-ups before getting himself back in the swing of things with the heavy hitters here?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. I predict that I think Ryan's going to take some time off, and if he comes back, it'll be maybe at the very end of the year, and maybe get that second fight under his belt for 2023. The problem here is that now you lost to Ryan Garcia, to Tank Davis. If Tank Davis if Ryan wants a title shot, it is gonna have to be a wait and see situation with whoever wins with Lomachenko and Haney. What the winner does with the bout, because if Haney wins and he decides I can't go 135 anymore, I'm gonna have to move up. That opens up so many different possibilities. But while he's taking that break, other fighters are going to position themselves up for another shot. Now, there might be some names that you can argue could be interesting fights for him to come back, but I don't know. But it all depends on what type of fight is Ryan looking for in his first fight back. I would like it. I would love it if Ryan Garcia, if he wants to still test himself, throw himself into the wolves, a good first fight back, Isaac Cruz is a fight that a lot of people were actually interested in seeing until that fight kind of fell apart-ish with Ryan and Isaac. Isaac is still tough. Isaac is still very much a threat at 135 pounds. I think people came away from Isaac's fight against Gervonta Davis a little while back and came out impressed, thinking like, okay, he was able to do decent work for being a late notice kind of opponent. So that's a fight that I could see work out pretty well. There's Golden Boy does have a few fighters at lightweight that they could make an in-house fight. I mean, I don't know if Joseph Diaz could potentially work. Joseph's been on such a bad slide. He's lost his last three. He's just not the fighter that he once was. Maybe William Zepeda. William Zepeda is an interesting fight, but I don't think Golden Boy would make that fight because you have an undefeated young prospect in William Zepeda who's been looking phenomenal, and you have Ryan Garcia who needs to bounce back. I don't think Golden Boy, for as much as they like to throw their young prospects to the wolves, and they like giving their prospects tough fights, I think that's a fight that they'll maybe avoid because you're essentially shooting yourself in one foot with whoever loses the fight. I mean, if William loses to Ryan, Ryan comes back and looks good, but now you lost all the momentum you had in William Zepeda and vice versa.
Yep.
So I like Isaac Cruz. I think that's a really good fight. I think that's still a makeable fight in my opinion.
So what is on tap? We mentioned Haney and Lomachenko. What is next on the boxing calendar of stuff that you're excited about? Like what have you circled as far as these are events that you're really excited about?
So, and it's funny, I actually had a tweet, I think it was today or yesterday, I can't even remember at this point, but there are a lot of fights that I think are real good that are coming up. You mentioned Haney and Lomachenko. Upcoming, Junta Nakatani versus Andrew Maloney is a flyweight world title fight. Is a phenomenal fighter. You haven't seen Junta Nakatani, who's this fantastic Japanese fighter. He's kind of the next guy in Japan that's kind of taking over the international scene with how good he fights. That's a fight that's coming up in next month. That's also really good. Katie Taylor versus Chantel Cameron. I know it's not the fight that everybody wanted to after Amanda Serrano got hurt, but Chantel Cameron is still an electric fighter at 140 pounds. Katie Taylor is not taking an easy fight with Chantel Cameron. I expect Katie to win, but I think it's going to be a really, really good and fun fight. Lee Wood against Mauricio Lara is an interesting with potential fireworks at featherweight. I think it's I want to say that fight's coming in June. Off the top of my head, I can't remember. And then whenever Stephen Fulton and Naoya Inoue gets remade, we still don't know when exactly that fight's going to happen after Inoue got hurt. That to me, Inoue versus Fulton, that to me, I would argue, it makes one of the best cases for being the best pound for pound boxer in the world, especially for Inoue, because if Inoue goes from undisputed in his, I think with third, fourth weight class that he's won a world title in, to the next weight class and beats the guy in his first fight, I think that about solidifies him as the number one, not just the number one fighter pound for pound, but also I would argue the greatest Japanese boxer of all time. And in turn, Stephen Fulton, absolute killer at 122 pounds. There's just so much really good boxing coming in the next couple of months. And we don't have anything on tap for the second half of 2023. And there's a lot of really good stuff that could potentially happen if the chips fall right.
All right. So what about you? What are you doing these days as far as your coverage? I know you just said that, the day job is taking up a lot of your time, but are you still writing here and there? Are you still doing any YouTube stuff here and there? Like what's on tap for you?
It's funny you mentioned that. I had been, for those of you who who may not remember, once upon a time when I was part of a regular part of the Fight Game Media Network with Robert Silva, I left the show pound for pound because I needed to focus on my day job. It was keeping me away from doing so. And in some ways it still does, but I've been wanting to sort of get myself back into it. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do because I want to do so many different things with boxing. I still want to write. I still want to do more YouTube stuff. There's just I don't know. What do you think, Garrett? I'm thinking maybe I should write a book. I've been thinking about writing a book on boxing for a while. That's been one of my goals. I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out.
Here's the thing: is you're still a very young dude, and so getting your career off the ground and making sure that you have that going, and because what I think people understand this is just a very passionate hobby for us, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you can swing a few things, you can make a few bucks here and there, but really it is because you love this stuff and you're passionate about it versus, it's a career. Now, if you could make it a career, I'm sure you would, you would be into something like that. But we're content creators. We're doing it on the side. We're doing it for fun. We're doing it to build things. And I think focusing on your career, making sure that that is set and things are going well and you're moving up the chain the way that you want. And then you'll find pockets of time to do stuff. And, this is a problem with a lot of content creators is you're so excited. You have so many ideas and you go full bore into them. And then all of a sudden you just exhaust yourself and then you stop again.
Yeah.
And then 2 months later you get so I would just, my advice to you would be just to do it casually, right? Just to write a few things here and there. Whether it's like longer pieces that you don't even really care where it's published. There's Substacks out there. You had that newsletter going for a while. Do it less for the immediate gratification of X number of people reading it, and do it just for your own self-value of, I can still do this and I want to keep my chops and I want to do it for, making sure that I can, keep the pen warm and still can do it for when the time comes where I can do it a little bit more. That's what I would do, but I would not put pressure on yourself to be like, oh my gosh, I'm really good at this and I'm wasting this. No, you're doing what is right for your life, right? You're setting things up for yourself. And that's, that's most important. And this stuff is always going to be there for you when you have the time to do it. So
I will say I do miss having to travel all the way to Warren, Ohio to cover a Don King paper. Yeah. For those of you who went to fightgamemedia.com and read the old articles, and I went to Warren, Ohio because Don King was doing a pay-per-view there. I don't know. By the way, do you know what's been happening with Don King lately?
Gosh, somebody said something about him and I can't remember what it was.
So Don King,
is it Broner's promoter or something like that?
So Don King recently signed Adrian Broner to a promotional deal. And the funny thing is, today in Vegas, there was supposed to be a breakfast with Don and Adrian, and it was going to announce the next fight, the next chapter. And then neither of them show up. You had media, some media like, okay, we're here, fine. We're here, all right, let's see what Don and Adrian got to say. None of them show up, and you have, I think, was Don's lawyer, I think, and just does the whole spiel for 20 minutes, and that's it. It doesn't really make any announcement. I'm just like,
I mean, the guy who used to be the absolute best at creating something out of nothing. I mean, people are too hip to that game these days. It's a different game for him, unfortunately. But Big Bob is still doing his thing, and
they're the same age. And you couldn't find two more opposite promoting styles and current activity than these two in their 90s.
Yeah. So here's what I will say is, for to keep the itch for you to keep scratching that itch. If you want to come back and do stuff like this, I can't promise that I will be available for every big fight to do this, because sometimes
I can't promise you that I'll be available after every big fight.
But with my schedule and the pro wrestling scene dominating everything for me, But this was perfect. I was like, I was so happy that this fight happened because I miss this feeling. I
Yeah.
missed the big fight feeling that, and we were pretty spoiled. Maybe we didn't get the matchups that we wanted, when Floyd took over. But you go back to, the De La Hoya years, and then they transitioned into the Mayweather and Pacquiao years. Those guys, there was like 2 or 3 big fights from both of those dudes every year. And so, every other month it felt like there was, you're watching greatness, whether it's Pacquiao or Mayweather. And then there was other great fighters as well who, were not as good as those guys, but they were right there. Andre Ward, who he's got a documentary that's coming out that I think is going to be pretty must see. And, I miss that. And I talked to Robert about that. And I was like, I really miss the HBO boxing being sort of the distribution channel of the kind of the calendar and of telling me what's important and what's coming up and who's good. And Jim Lampley, doing the fight game show that he stole the name of from me. And like, I just miss that. Like, I wish HBO was still in the game for that reason, because I think my interest would just be there a little bit more, because the distribution is just so out of whack with boxing. Like, you have to subscribe to all these different Twitter channels just to know who's fighting who. And, I know DAZN has fights every weekend, multiple shows. And so what's important, what is must watch if they have so many fights. And so it's something that I'm hoping to get back into a little bit more, but it's a challenge because it's not like it was even 10 years ago.
No, no, it really is. And I mean, look, and I don't expect HBO with the current leadership group over there. I don't expect HBO boxing to be back anytime soon, unless there's like such a drastic change at the top to where you bring in new people that actually are boxing fans and want to bring it back. That I just don't see HBO boxing coming back. But I mean, the way it died, it was just so sad. Just it was a shame that HBO boxing went away because it was such an institution.
Yep.
It's basically what made me a boxing fan, because I remember watching all those HBO boxing cards. The World Championship boxing, the boxing after dark shows. I mean, those were, to me, what turned me into a fan.
Yep.
And I think that having something like that, I think would be a net positive for boxing fans. But I mean, but overall, I think Showtime has been doing an excellent job keeping the lights on, so to speak, because a lot of their recent shows, or in the last few years, has just been absolutely superb. And they have done a great job with showcasing newer talent and giving us really good fights that further elevates guys, and they've been able to build off of that into the future. Gervonta Davis winning tonight, Showtime is going to do so much to capitalize on that, because this thing's going to do numbers. It's going to do the best numbers boxing will do for a guy not named Canelo or Tyson Fury or Deontay Wilder. I came into this thinking maybe 500,000 would be a nice jumping off point, a nice even number to predict where the show could go. I remember seeing people thinking this could do 600,000, 650. I'm going to say, if it does over 500,000, I think it's a really big win for boxing. And even if not, if it just comes to that, close to that number, I think it's still great for the sport, and proves that, when you put politics to the side and you're willing to cross to that other side of the street, I think, boxing as a whole grows.
I think it's a great point, and why don't we end on that? I really appreciate you coming on. I've missed doing this. I said the same thing to Robert, like, man, I haven't talked to you about this stuff in a long time. And I talked to him yesterday. Now I talked to you tonight. So thank you for doing this. And hopefully we'll be able to do more in the future with this new podcast that I have. So anything you want to mention, or you want to promote anything before we get out of here?
I will say I am slowly starting to get back into the kick of things with boxing, because I haven't told you. I think I may have told you this, but I have been dealing with a real bad cough the last few months.
Ooh.
That has honestly, in talking since January, that has prevented me from being able to get on camera and just talk. Because that's actually one of the things I actually wanted to do is just do more YouTube stuff, more streaming stuff. I haven't done any of that because of this cough. Now that I finally got it under control,
Was
maybe
was it a COVID thing?
No, that was the weird thing. It's not COVID. At first, we thought it was bronchitis, and they gave me medication for bronchitis. Did nothing, so it was like, all right, it's definitely not bronchitis because it did nothing. So yeah, so I will, if I decide to do more stuff on the YouTube side, I will certainly make that known on my Twitter at Carlos Toro Media. I'm certainly going to try to do more stuff on Twitch, where I do, I guess, more video game stuff. I'm thinking maybe I'll stream some more some boxing video games if I can figure out how to work that part in. You can find, and I'll also, and if you're into the video game stuff, I'm starting to stream on Twitch a little bit more, which is at Toronite, Toronite. And who knows, maybe I will do my long-awaited second part of streaming Mike Tyson's Punch-Out on the NES, which I did New Year's Eve of 2021. And I said, all right, next week I'm going to do it. I got stopped at Piston Honda. No, not Piston Honda, Don Flamingo. Okay. And I thought, okay, next week we'll do it. It's been almost 3 years since that, and there's been no part 2. So maybe I'll finally get into that.
So you wanted to go from Glass Joe all the way through to Tyson in one spin.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I was never going to get to Mike Tyson in one go. I'm not good at Mike Tyson's Punch-Out at all. But at the very least, getting into close to that circuit where you have to complete it, ends with I think at the NES is Macho Man, and then you fight Tyson.
Yeah,
I
think you might have to beat Macho Man. Do you have to beat him once or twice? I can't remember. There's a couple guys you have to beat twice, like Bald Bull. Maybe you have to beat him twice or something. But yeah. But what about the Tyson code? You can just throw the Tyson code in there and go.
I am not going to cheat myself out of that experience of going through that gauntlet. When it comes to video games, I sometimes like to punish myself and go through the longest road to be able to get to that destination. Well, even if it is foolish.
For the longest time, I could not beat Super Macho Man, but I could beat Tyson. And so whenever I tried to go through the whole way, I would lose to Super Macho Man every single time. But I could put the code in, and once out of every 2 or 3 times I could beat Tyson. But then I finally beat Super Macho Man.
But that's different. You're basically there. You're right at the end. I'm still at Don Flamenco. I don't have an excuse to put in that code.
Yeah, Don Flamenco was his slow and loopy uppercuts and stuff, if I'm remembering correctly. All right. Thanks again. And thanks to folks who were tuning in, both on video and on the audio on our Patreon. So for Carlos, I am Double G. This has been Fight Game Podcast Extra bonus show on the Patreon. We'll see you when we see you. Peace out.